Welcome to Hong Kong, the island city of China packed with 7 million people at unbelievable density. But if you, dear tourist, start from Victoria Harbour and head toward the mainland, you'll find that while Hong Kong is China, she doesn't act like it. To cross the bridge, your passport must be checked and stamped and checked and stamped, not because you're a suspicious foreigner, mainland Chinese can't just stroll across either, but rather because Hong Kong has her own immigration policy. And Hong Kong isn't the only isolated island. There's nearby Macau with her own passport checking bridge and a ferry between them, which also checks passports. Travel from Hong Kong to Macau to the mainland and back and you'll end up with 3 stamps, and that goes for everyone. Hong Kongese can't just live in Macau, and Macanese can't live in Hong Kong, and they both can't just live on the mainland. Yet, it's all China, and inconvenient travel isn't the only specialty of these sister islands. They also have separate governments and political parties, separate police, separate money, postal system, schools, and languages. Hong Kong even has her own Olympic team, which competed in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, which doesn't make any kind of sense. The only thing these sister islands don't have that other countries do are 1. Their own armies, though that isn't entirely unique with modern countries, and 2. Formal diplomatic relations. Though even this is unclear, as both are members of international trade organizations and other countries have embassies in Hong Kong and Macau. Sure, China won't let them be called embassies, those are only for mighty Beijing. They're called consulates, even if they're bigger than Beijing's embassies. All this makes Hong Kong and Macau, as mentioned in a previous video, the most country-like countries that aren't countries. So why are they China? China says so. It's called One China 2 systems, though fast counters in the audience will see it should be called One China 3 systems. Also, there's China's special economic zones where capitalism runs free, making it more like One China 4 systems, and if China got her way, it might be One China 5 systems. We can't talk about everything, so back to China, Hong Kong, and Macau. Oh my. China ended up having these 2 essentially city-states, as always, because empire. Portugal showed up in Asia in the 1500s and didn't exactly make friends. China and Portugal skirmished until Portugal used bigger pile of money diplomacy to bribe a local Chinese official into turning over the islands of Macau as a trading port she could use. Later, Britannia found China and discovered that she had many lovely things like silks and porcelain and precious tea that Britannia craved. In return, China wanted from Britannia to be left alone, and Britannia nobly agreed to respect China's independence and sovereignty. Oops, opium wars. Nothing generates demand like addiction, which Britannia was happy to supply, and her bigger gun diplomacy secured Hong Kong as a base through which the drugs must flow. Later, in a world where telegraphs and light bulbs were newfangled, Elise gave control of Hong Kong to Britannia for 99 years, or quote, as good as forever, kicking the transfer problem down the generations to be dealt with by the unimaginably futuristic society of the 1990s. Thus, these cities grew up under the influence of their empirific parents. Hong Kong had English common law and lived in Britannia's org chart as one of her many crown colonies, and Macau had Portuguese civil law. And the parental effect is still seen today. Visit Hong Kong and she is clearly Britannia's daughter, what with her love of business and international finance and lasers and English accented language and near identical transport system. Macau had a more troubled adolescence as her bigger sister stole the spotlight with her trading skills, but Macau eventually grew up to be the gambling capital of the world. She's Las Vegas times 10 with a mixture of both Portugal and China. But empires come and empires go, and the 90s eventually arrived, meaning Britannia's lease expired. Portugal claimed the treaty gave her control of Macau forever, but China disagreed, and the UN was in a no empires no longer mood, and frankly, had Portugal complained too much, China could have used her own bigger army diplomacy at this point to resolve the situation. So the transfer was going to happen, but the world was nervous about China, what with the lingering communism and all, so the deal was the empire's daughters would go, but they had to remain basically independent, to which China agreed, as long as everyone else agreed to call them China. The situation was a bit like if the US had to give Alaska back to Russia, and Russia super promised to leave Alaska self-governing. We couldn't blame the locals for being nervous. But unlike what you'd expect in this case, China has mostly left little sister islands alone, so everything is dandy. However, the handover came with its own version of the as good as forever clause. China didn't agree to leave Hong Kong and Macau alone for all time, only 50 years, again passing political problems to a future generation. Hopefully one that's actually unimaginably futuristic this time. Anyway, assuming such provincial concerns as these are not rendered irrelevant by the singularity, what happens in the 2040s? Will Hong Kong and Macau remain tiny city-states, or will they lose their independence and be absorbed? Only China knows, and China does not say.